All right, everyone. Welcome to session 3, Telehealth Accessibility for Patients with Blindness and Low Vision. And this session will be led and moderated by Dr. John Ross, J.R. Rizzo. He's a physician scientist leader at NYU Langone Health. He is currently the Health System Director of Disability Inclusion, endowed professor of rehabilitation medicine, and the vice chair of innovation and equity in the Rusk Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine, with cross appointments in the Department of Neurology, Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, and the at NYU Tandon School of Engineering. He is the Associate Director of Healthcare for the renowned NYU Wireless and Associate Faculty for the Center for Urban Science and Progress at the N. He leads the Visual Motor Integration Laboratory, exploring motor control with a special emphasis on visual guidance, and the Rehabilitation Engineering and Center Transforming Low Vision Laboratory, exploring bio-inspired multisensory assistive technologies with a special emphasis on advanced wearables. And JR will introduce the panel. Thank you so much, JR. Please.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's so good to be with you all on this exciting occasion talking about disability and telehealth. So again, our panel is focused on telehealth accessibility for patients with blindness and low vision. And again, I'd like to say my name with a receding hairline and a sharp 5 o'clock shadow at about 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm wearing thick brown glasses, a red shirt, a brown plaid blazer. I am wearing pants, I promise, and I'm standing in front of a virtual background that depicts a really fun brain-based network model. I want to also start off by thanking the SMATI team, especially Drs. Poulos and Srinivasan, along with the entire organizing committee for putting together such a wonderful production today. And I'm very, very pleased to be with some colleagues, some co-panelists, and some friends. We're here with Dr. Nathaniel Gleason, Mr. Albert Rizzi, and Mr. Tanner Garris. And I'm going to start off by asking them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your background in alphabetical order with first name. So we'll start off with you, Albert. Sometimes the space bar will be a trick. There you go.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Let's
Thanks,
take that
Albert.
again. As JR said, my name is Albert Rizzi. I lost my eyesight unexpectedly about 19 years ago now. Long story short, it was a misdiagnosis and lab mishap. What I thought was my annual sinus infection ended up being a lethal form of meningitis. I lost my sight, but not my vision for all things possible. I am the founder and CEO of My Blind Spot, an organization dedicated to digital accessibility and inclusion and usability for people across the ability spectrum. We work with people who are deaf, blind, mobility impaired, cognitively delayed, aging, and speech impediments. We have people on our team who are actually paralyzed from the neck down, who are very adept at navigating the website, both with speech-to-text technologies and with eye gaze technologies. And we are very excited about working with major corporations, and now recently, after a stint in the hospital, with NYU Langone, trying to promote inclusion, authentic inclusion of ability alongside race, gender, orientation, religion, and the aging population who are becoming more and more reliant on technologies in the 21st century. I think I'll leave it there for now, JR, unless there's more you want me to expound on.
No, that's perfect, Albert. Thank you so much.
Right.
And why don't we move on to Nathaniel?
Hi, good morning from San Francisco. Just want to confirm you all can hear me okay?
Loud
Great.
and clear.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled about this. So I'm a white man. I have a black beard and black curly hair with lots of gray on the temples. And I'm sitting in front of a background of a couple photographs of my kids. I have two boys. So I'm a primary care doctor, and I graduated from residency in 2011 and did a lot of kind of clinical and technology innovation work. I developed a program at UCSF, and then I sort of moved more and more into administration and decided 2 years ago that I really wanted to focus more on clinical medicine. So I moved my clinical practice to the San Francisco VA, and now I see veterans every day in the clinic and in the hospital, and via telehealth. Um, Half of my role really is telemedicine. We do telemedicine through California, Nevada, and the Pacific. A lot of patients in Guam, a lot of veterans. And as you know, the people with disabilities are overrepresented in the veterans population. And veterans who are navigating those functional limitations have a disproportionate amount of other chronic diseases too. Um, and then, so I have a visual disability called achromatopsia. It's congenital. My acuity is about 2400. I see no color, and I'm super light sensitive. So basically, I only have rod cells. I have no functioning cone cells. Accommodations wise, I use a great big display everywhere I go. Actually read my laptop, so I kind of carry it from home to work in different rooms at the hospital, and then plug it into a big screen. Um, and use a magnification software. I use a white cane mostly just as an identifier. Um, and I use a lot of different magnifiers to do my work. And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Tanner.
Thanks, JR, for having me, and appreciate everybody's grace and setup. For everybody who can't see, just imagine, a retired underwear model. But for everybody else, I am disheveled and in a car right now. I'm playing beach baseball at a tournament in San Antonio. I have short brown hair, I'm white skinned, and I have a shorter beard. And I'm wearing my team's jersey, the Bayou City Heat. I'm managing director of accessibility officer, and we're a digital company who provides vocational rehabilitation and job training services for those who are blind or deafblind or otherwise severely disabled to become digital accessibility testers. And then we have the job sourcing and development program for voc rehab called the Getting Hard Playbook. And all of that is stemming from me losing my sight in a terrible auto accident in 2004, and just really overnight understanding the insane amount of discrimination, bias, stigma, stereotypes that people with disabilities face, especially those who are blind. I faced this first in the medical community, and then in society and school in the corporate world. And so when I started accessibility officer, it was really important for me to hire blind, knowing firsthand what it's like to be qualified, to be ready and unable to work. And so I'm so passionate about employment, and our vision is that the U.S. disabled unemployment rate is the same as rate.
Thanks so much, Tanner. I really appreciate having you all here. So we're going to move into our second question. I'll encourage the participants to put questions into Slido so we can field those questions shortly. We have 5 or 6 prepared to build up some momentum. Question 2, what gaps, and specifically digital gaps, do you all believe still exist in the healthcare industry, particularly as it relates to diversity and authentic inclusion for persons who are blind or low vision? And I think, just to keep it simple, we'll go back in alphabetical order for the first 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll give you a break, Albert, I promise.
Great. No worries. Yeah, and I'm, I forgot to describe myself. White guy, salt and pepper, too much salt these days, wearing a black shirt up against a white wall in my office at my home in Bellport, New York. There you go. Well, gaps, I've noticed the gaps when I first lost my eyesight were prevalent, despite the regulations and the mandates in place. But as a silver lining to the pandemic, there was a huge amount of attention paid to those of you who are temporarily able. Those of you who are not disabled yet are going to join this community of people that the World Health Organization has determined will be 2.5 people by 2030. That's almost 5 years from now. I thought 1.4 billion was a significant number, but as the aging baby boomers transition into their golden years, they will also acquire a disability and make them one of the most popular, for lack of a better term, minority groups that are at the intersectionality of aging, orientation, religion, and gender. I ran into a lot of gaps over the years, but as our colleague who spoke about the circumstances of people who are deaf and deafblind, there has been significant progress. Point in hand, the Zoom platform that we're coming to you on live took the time and the effort during the pandemic to really kick things up a notch. But like the previous speaker mentioned, not being able to go into a doctor's office and use their touchscreen platforms is really limiting. Some of the mobile apps are limited, but overall, what I have found since my stint at the Long Island Community Hospital here on Long Island, which is now partnering with NYU Langone, the idea of digital equity and usability is catching on, and the impact that is happening. But again, the disconnect, I think, and the gaps still are present, and it's fine tuning. The difference is, in my opinion, usability versus some arbitrary accessibility standard that is antiquated and tied back to those days when we were worried about public access and physical access to forums. But it's all about the understanding the usability and functionality of a digital platform, whether it's an app, electronic document, and relying on those of us who are stakeholders in those outcomes, the end users, to give good feedback on how to improve those already advancing improvements that I've gotten to enjoy. I'll give it back to you.
Thanks so much, Albert. Dr. Gleason?
It's great. So I was thinking about the physical world and the accessibility barriers, and it begins every doctor's office with this absurdity where you are handed some paperwork that, number one, contains a bunch of questions that they already know the answers to, and number two is like tiny type with little tiny spaces where you're supposed to write a response. So we in telehealth, we really do have an equivalent to this. The corollary is just the login and the registration. And I'm going to venture that most everyone with low vision who's logged into this conference has adaptive tech and and then there's just a whole other group of low vision patients who don't. And so I'm often encountering people who just can't log in. And so that is a real barrier that I want to call out. Other sort of barriers to accessibility that I think transcend all settings, in person and telehealth, include the assumptions that we make about our blind patients. We know that we don't ask about travel, drug use, sex, relationships. We make a lot of assumptions. And the last thing I want to say is we don't provide the sort of foundational training in cultural competencies to providers and nurses, things like the sighted guide technique, or just announcing that you're about to make physical contact with someone, or using the clock face for directions. And the one more thing is we don't have clear processes for providing written materials in alternate formats in medicine, whether that's telehealth or.
Thanks so much, Dr. Gleason. I'd also like to just add, since you mentioned it, aside above and beyond from the registration issues with telehealth platforms, I think another big gap, a couple of gaps that we've encountered here in New York City include the presentation of visual media on telehealth platforms. Oftentimes you're on these sort of little screens and it's very difficult to use existing, if you're low vision, visual enhancement techniques really become insufficient. Or if you're making sure that, whatever aid is offered inclusively with either alt text descriptions or is compatible with a screen reader. And so I think, a lot of times even simple gesturing from the physicians in those telehealth encounters may not be described sufficiently for patients who are blind or low vision, or creating some standards around those descriptions. Because when you're unfamiliar with doing that, oftentimes you end up getting a lackluster experience, and that creates further disparities. So that said, I'll turn it over to Tate if he has additional thoughts.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it. And the underlying theme that I think we're all pointing at is that there's just an overall lack of awareness with regards to the needs and how to approach those in a systematic way, not just in person, not just telehealth, not just sending someone to a kiosk, not just sending someone some pieces of paper to fill out, not just grabbing someone by the wrist and pulling them to the weigh-in machine. You know, just a total lack of awareness of the needs of someone with a disability, which I think can often be overcome with preparedness, but also asking the question, what's the best way? I'm new at this. What's the best way for me to help you?
JR, may I interject
Yes,
here for a minute?
please. Yes, please,
One
Albert.
of the
Back to
one of
you.
the other things. So one of the other things that you tapped on, and I think this will resonate with those in administration. One of the critical components that I've noticed are lacking are being able to pay our bills. You know, we really can't have the resources to are sort of lacking at this moment if we can't pay our invoices. So it goes down to something as simple as that too. And I think once they can understand, they being the administrators and the hospitals and the doctors' offices, that is one area we need to work on. They might be more receptive to allowing us to be seen as valuable members of their patient group to be treated properly because we can pay properly.
100%. Thanks so much, Albert. Okay, we're going to move into our next question. Given your personal experiences managing your health, kindly tell me about the good, the bad, and the ugly in healthcare, both in doctors' offices, hospitals, and telehealth specifically, through the lens of access and accessibility. And let's go in reverse order this time to give Albert a break. And we'll start off with Tanner.
Yeah, I think the good thing is that in general, broad strokes here is that people want to do the right thing. They really care. They do have a lot of focus on their patients and they're trying to do the best thing. I think that's the good thing. The underlying bad thing that I see is just really gaps in change, right? Like, you know, I can only educate people so much, right? And so how do we begin to not just like change education and awareness in college, right? In medical school, but actually in clinical, right? When doctors can have awareness created around how they're going to apply healthcare or care to patients of diverse populations, right? And if we can figure out a way to coordinate that with the universities and the hospitals and create more patient awareness around diverse needs in the clinical setting, I think that we might be able to see some bigger changes moving forward.
Excellent. Hear, hear. All right, moving back to Nathaniel.
So there's mentions for my vision, and I pretty much avoid doctors personally. So I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna take. I know this, the intent of this question is to get at the patient experience, and I'm just gonna describe someone I'm taking care of right now, if that's
Sure.
okay. Is an 80-year-old. We'll call him Scott. He's blind. He's been blind since about age 50. Super independent, super active, until he got sick last year. And he has several months of just muscle wasting, but also like whole body swelling. Unclear cause, very long, complicated evaluation, and he lives about an hour north of here in San Francisco. He doesn't have a ready way to get to San Francisco. So, as we've learned, telehealth should make his life better, right? It should give him more access. And it does. Sometimes his daughter comes and visits, and she can connect him onto the VA's proprietary telehealth sort of Zoom equivalent app. But when she's not there, he can't launch this thing. Doesn't have the kind of accessible tech that a lot of visually impaired people do. He sort of represents that other group of people who don't. And so what I do is I call him, right? I call him because that's the best we can do. But I really want to appreciate the earlier question during Dr. Kuchenlager's presentation about the potential risk of disparity in care for people who are over-reliant on telehealth. So we're missing some key things when I call him. Like I don't get to actually to wait. I don't get to review his medicines. I'm never totally confident that he's taking the medicines I think he's taking. And so I'm always balancing that against the request that he come in, because coming in is a huge deal. And so I just wanted to put that out there as a story that there's some real clear compromises that we make with telehealth, and it's a challenge.
Thanks, Nat. Let's go back to Albert.
And springboarding off of what Nathaniel, I would call Scott locationally challenged on top of it. When we look at telehealth, it's very important and it's very much relied on by people who are so far from a doctor's office or from a hospital or don't have the resources to get transported from point A to point B. So the telehealth options are going to be very critical in order for healthcare professionals to administer the type of someone like Scott would need. My personal experience has been drastically improved since I was just in the hospital in January for emergency surgery. I ripped my intestines, had to get a colostomy bag, and I went to a hospital that nobody in my town could stand. And again, through the NYU Langoon partnership, there have been some significant improvements. I felt very well communicated to. People were very, as Tana had pointed out, letting me know when they were coming in for the most part, but a lot of the techs didn't even know I was blind, so that meant they weren't looking at the charts. The portals that I had to use now with NYU Langoon and the doctors themselves have motivated me to leave a doctor's office in New York City that I've been going and have had numerous conversations with their administrators. And it's a national group now. And they would not or could not even understand how to entertain my concerns and my access and usability barriers, down to the texts they would send for me to respond as with regard to, or the links that they would send, and or just the overall manner with which they would take care of me. I also ran into issues with various labs that we all use or are told to use, on the same level of not being able to use accessible platforms or the digital offerings when we get there. Not talking to me directly if I happen to have come with somebody who is driving me. It could be my Uber driver for whatever reason, and they're turning and talking to that person, asking them my personal questions rather than speaking to me directly. And I think, and maybe my colleagues will concur, it's education on both sides of the fence. We as stakeholders in the outcomes need to advocate in a welcoming way and in an empathetic, compassionate way to understand the business aspects of what is or is not possible, as well as not being angry about what we're not getting, because we want to be of the advancements. And that's what really helped me with my stay at the Long Island Community Hospital. Is I spoke to the administrators. I let them know what I was happy about, what I thought could be improved. And I'm hoping to be a disability counselor or advisor on how to improve access to and care for people with disabilities. And I think if we put ourselves in those positions, conversations, these constructive conversations about what we need and how we want to be treated, we can open up doors of possibilities for a shift in directions that could be improved incrementally, given what has happened since the pandemic, in my opinion.
Thanks so much, Albert. Okay, we're going to transition into our fourth question. What are the biggest opportunities or lowest hanging fruit that could be and we'll start with Tanner again, keeping the order reversed.
Ooh, biggest opportunities with health systems. I think, to piggyback on what Nathan was talking about is like really understanding how to maximize the effectiveness of telehealth medicine while also, understanding the need for in-person, and then combined with the limitations of the patient with regards to comply to directives, right, to medical care. If a doctor tells me that I need to get to the gym 5 days a week, right, we were talking about the travel limiting component of having a disability like blindness or low vision. And it's significant, right? It's not only is it costly, right, if I have to hop in an Uber or a Lyft, but there's also the actual component of me getting lost or hitting my head on a bar. And, it's not as difficult. If I didn't have a home gym, I wouldn't to comply with with that order, right? So I think understanding, like, in with regards to how we systematically approach healthcare for people with disabilities, is understanding how we can maximize the effectiveness of telehealth, do what we can to help meet patients where they are, leveraging our tools, but also, when it's appropriate, right? When we need to see our patients in person so we can see the swelling, so we can get the weight, so that we can actually, look at them, um, and do that accordingly. I think that that's yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Tanner. Nathaniel, keeping you in the middle.
So I'm convinced, though anyone who's even peripherally involved in health systems uh, knows that they're obsessed with measuring things. And I'm convinced that until we start to capture this patient who seeks care here has a visual impairment, uh, one, nothing else can flow unless we have that. And so I want to acknowledge a study that came out just this week. It's so timely. It's the Journal of General Internal Medicine, and it's called Telehealth Use Among People with Visual Impairments: Evidence from the 2020 to 2022 National Health Interview Survey. And it tells us what we kind of already knew, that about 17% of people have low vision and about 2% have very limited vision. And it tells us one fact, which is that those telehealth than the general population. So we all knew that, but I think what would happen if institutions were capturing this in their EHR and it was showing up for each individual is, number one, they would say, oh, look, about 17% of our patients have low vision. Maybe we should do some more of our thoughtful, design thinking. Like, institutions are obsessed with design thinking, and they're surveying people relentlessly, right? And they're trying to focus on the of patients, but I've never seen them take a low vision patient and think, use that exercise and think through the process of those in-person visits or those telehealth visits or those visits to the lab. So starting with that data, recognizing who your population is vis-a-vis all disability, but we're talking about low vision here today. I think that would be my biggest one, and then simpler. So I think that in terms of opportunities, that the institution ought to effectively ask how I want to handle written information, um, get to know me in a way, asking how I navigate the world, how I read. Um, yeah, I think, and what kind of visits work best for me.
Yeah.
I think I'll leave it at that.
That's awesome. And I'll just amplify that by saying disability disclosure, disability disclosure, disability disclosure, right? You can't improve what you don't measure. And it's so important to make sure that we understand that status, the type, and then potentially the link to reasonable accommodation so we can respond agilely in the health system. And I think that's so important. So if you take anything away from this, particularly in the digital worlds, it's so important to think about disability disclosure, because that's the light being turned on to enable everything else you'll need. True inclusion. So that said, I'm going to pass it on to Albert. I just wanted to double click on that.
And I agree with you too on that one, JR. And Dr. Gleason, please share that with me and others when you get a chance. That's research. I think that's critically important for some of the things that I advocate for. Low-hanging fruit, and being myopic in my response, and as it relates to me personally and people who happen to be blind, ophthalmologists, y'all need to have your websites accessible. You all need to have options for large print, braille displays, magnifiers, speech to text technology, screen readers, or at least have introductions of those at the ready. When I lost my eyesight, the doctors that I was seeing had no clue about this. And as I would see eye doctors, none of their websites were accessible. So if we want to expound on and build on the research and the studies that Nathan just discussed, understanding, again, you are all temporarily able. You will be aging into a community of people that is 2.5 billion strong by the next 5 years. And you will be one of those people. So to be compassionately empathetic, would you want to not have access to your health care. That's critically in one instance. The other is working with people who happen to be living with that particular ability. You know nothing about us without us. We would have not had the civil rights movement's accomplishments and successes since the late 50s, early 60s for African Americans if it was not including them in the outcomes. Same thing with the ERA and women's rights in the 70s, LGBT rights in the 80s and the 90s. People with disabilities are now at a critical point in history to follow that historical trend and take their rightful place in society. We are the largest population of people. If we take a look at the 2.3 billion friends and family we have now, we're going to be 4.6 billion friends and family by 2030. And right now we have $8 trillion of power, where 4.5 trillion of that rests here in the North American continent. And about 62 million people with a disability live in the United States, and we have $300 million of disposable income. So if we look at it as a market base and move away from the warm, fuzzy, it's a good thing to do thing, you're going to see a dramatic improvement in one, owning it because you're going to become a member of this esteemed people who have been movers and shakers for centuries. And at the same time, by just creating a digital environment that's inclusive and then becoming aware of how people like to be treated, which is just a general best practice, you'll be able to be a member of a group of people who are going to be moving things in a positive direction that allow people with disabilities across the ability spectrum to be included in healthcare and live healthy, productive.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Albert. So pleased to be here with these big voices, getting in some good trouble here. So maybe two more questions. And again, and I'm going to encourage participants to throw questions in the Slido chat. Let's do question 5. If your doctors, if you were a private practitioner or health centers could change one thing right away, what would it be and why? So think of a glaring error or point. And let's start, please.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, Nathan brought it up earlier. It's just, whether it's, this tablet or this application or this like piece of paper that we have to fill out where they already know all the same. It's like, make that accessible, like make that seamless, figure out a way to, that I don't have to tell someone my whole medical history in the lobby of your office in front of all these other patients and be embarrassed by, being honest and disclosing exactly what's going on with my own person. If we can start off on the right foot, I think that the overall patient experience is going to just get so much better.
Excellent. Thanks, Tanner. Nathaniel?
So priorities wise, I mentioned that the EHR data one that we just discussed. I've got two other things that seem like they would be just practical high yield. One of them is about reimbursement. So we know that the phone is sometimes actually equal to video. Sometimes we want the video interface to work when it's needed, but not everyone has an evaluation for shortness of breath or in musculoskeletal problems or neuro problems. Sometimes you're talking about depression. Sometimes that blind person on the phone that is equal care, and you've made it more accessible by talking on the phone. And interestingly, reimbursement favors video over the phone. And so since we know that people with visual disabilities are going to rely more on telehealth, it makes sense to me to advocate for equal reimbursement, because we have this situation where health systems and providers are pushing people to use the video where it may or may not be clinically needed. And when it's not clinically needed, I don't think we should push it. I think that's creating a barrier. So that's an advocacy thing. And then on the point I thought of just for tangible things that would make a big difference is the video clarity. And I say this as a person who's low vision myself on the doctor end of the call. So this is something that affects all interactions, and maybe just I'm more aware of it, but the video resolution is not good for a rash or small lesion on someone's body, or a neural exam or something fine, or the prescription bottle that someone's holding up to the camera, at least in our system, there's no way to send a high resolution photo. And everyone has these high resolution cameras now on their phone. I would just love a simple interface where while you're doing a video call, someone can take that image and send it to you. And you could, and then I could zoom in as a low vision doctor, zoom in and look at the thing. That would, to me, that would make telehealth just much more powerful in terms of clinical utility.
Absolutely. Love that. To empower the clinicians. Albert, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to shy away from the technology aspect, believe it or not. I'm going to go back to, again, what the previous speaker spoke about, and I think that we've all touched on here, is that personal interaction, whether it's via telehealth or whether it's in person. I believe that all of the healthcare institutions, offices need to align themselves with a organization or a person like myblindspot.org. What we do is we really talk about how best to embrace and lift up the people with the disability, just awareness of how to approach a conversation about a person with a disability. And I think Nathan had touched on this, and her name was Essence. Essence was the head of the nursing floor at the hospital I was being treated at. And I was blown away when, as simple as it was, how would you like to be addressed and how can I best speak with you as a blind person? Just simple things like that. It reminds me of the CBS commercial that was centered on Gayle King. How do you speak to a person with a disability? Oh, I don't know. How about, hello, how are you? My name is Gail. Those long way. Understanding how people with a disability prefer to be spoken to and treated is critically important. And as I get back to being all about the blindness, you know, blindness is one of those things that for literally thousands of years, along with other disabilities, has gotten a blind eye and a deaf ear turned to it. Because we weren't worthy of God's love. We weren't worthy of our communities. We were put out into the elements. We were shunned. We all these other things. And mentally, that still is present. You know, subconsciously, we are fearful of, and this has been a study I saw since losing my eyesight. One is dying of AIDS or cancer. Then you flip those two back and forth. And the third thing is fearing blindness. You know, and that stems from two emotions, guilt and fear. Guilt that we couldn't stop the loved one from acquiring that disability, and fear because we might catch it or we might. Well, newsflash, you will be getting it. And if we don't start looking at the possibilities of that being a truth, we're doing nobody a disservice, let alone ourselves. So I think being empathetic is critically important, and understanding, like, I won't call it sensitivity training because we've been so sensitively trained that it doesn't work. Just rely on those of us from the community to consult with and guide you in best practices on race and treat people with disabilities.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Albert. Yeah, absolutely. Education with specific attention to language and etiquette is how we often refer to it. So
okay,
super
thank you.
Important. Yeah. Yes, absolute highlight here. I also wanted to throw one more idea into the ring. You know, at NYU Langone, we've been, for the last year or so, looking intently at patient access metrics. So for all of those in the healthcare industry here, I think it's really important. So what do I mean by that? I mean, no-show rates or missed appointments or patient punctuality or the operational efficiency of you closing out a clinic or some sort of service protocol on time on a particular day. And, you know, by and large, it's surprising for a lot of folks. When you look at the data, the national no-show rate is about 15 to 20%. So we started doing some pilot investigations in our ophthalmology clinics to look at no-show rate correlated with disability status. And guess what started to shake out? If you had a strong, more severe visual disability, and this was only visual acuity, so I believe it's going to get worse once we include field deficits, right? The sort of two primary axes affected with blindness and low vision being visual acuity and field. But only looking at visual acuity and severity correlated with no-show rates, strong correlation. So if you had a higher visual disability with more severity, then you were more likely to no-show to your appointment. And that's not because these individuals didn't need the medical care. It's, our hypothesis is that there are too many barriers in the
Yep.
physical and digital environments, right? And
Yep.
so we're now carrying on those studies in a lot of other departments. Hopefully, we'll have a publication on that in a few weeks. So stay tuned. But I would really encourage you to look at your patient access metrics and disability status and severity, and potentially provided reasonable accommodations. I think you're going to have some eye-opening data on your hands.
And
Pun intended.
hey, JR, to drive that point home, and again, bringing my personal experiences into, you are a person who is reliant on the kindness of strangers, so to speak, or reliant on public transportation, or, yeah, the public transportation systems, they have the accessibility, transit, paratransit. They're not always on time. They're not dependable. So the anxiety level of a person who, and thing on the myopic aspect of being blind, it's disconcerting. Sometimes up at your home, sometimes they require you to walk to a bus stop. So there's a lot of hurdles that a person with a disability who happens to be blind, who can't move independently on their own, they have to overcome. Sometimes we have to take a train. I know I've missed my appointments because I missed my connection because my taxi didn't get there on time. And in instances where you miss an appointment, you're supposed to pay for that appointment when we're already also financially challenged, bit much. So if we take a look at those studies that you have and the matrices that you just spoke to, and understand and look at the importance of the value that no access to transportation bears in all of this. Again, I am not surprised that blind people tend to be the biggest no-show on your roster.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Albert. So I think I am monitoring the chat here. One question that came in, but we have about 8 or so minutes left in our session. So why don't I throw one last question out there to sort of end with our formal questions on a positive note. So how do you feel personally, or what do you feel personally has improved most in healthcare management of persons with disabilities in the last few years? Let's try to end on a cheery note here. Anyone want to go first? Tanner?
Yeah, I'll say that, getting my blood work results online and actually seeing the numbers myself and being able to look at that, rather than just like taking someone's word for it, I think has been really, created a lot of equity for myself and ownership with regards to my healthcare, right? Like if I'm able to monitor what the data says and track that on my own through patient portals and, continue to check in with my doctor remotely like this, I think that is, gave me so much more confidence, and really just kind of control, right, over, hey, I have influence here, I have control, and not only that, but I have insight on the progress that my active management of my healthcare, I have access to the progress that we're making. So I think that the digital inclusion and yeah, that's been good.
Excellent. Agency and autonomy. Love it. Okay. Nathaniel.
The patient portal questions, a very charged issue in primary care, because the volume of questions that come in is just drowning everyone. And yet, when I force myself to be honest about your question, the biggest difference for me, hands down, is being able to ask a question in the patient portal, and not have to physically go. And we've talked at length about accessibility, and it's very real. So I'll just be honest and say, yeah, it's being able to ask a clinician that portal.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Albert?
An up note positive. Again, I have, the last time I was in the hospital was in 2005. So that I was just in the hospital a few months ago for 2 weeks. There was the portal. Again, hats off to NYU Langone for being usable and accessible. To Tanner's point, I was able to look at paperwork and understand the diagnosis and the treatments I was getting day by day. I was able to access it from my phone and at home when I got to my laptop. there have been improvements in understanding how to speak to a person with a disability. Uh, I just, again, the digital inclusion, the usability and accessibility is ongoing. Still, 80% of the digital platforms are not usable as they could be or as accessible as they need to be. Um, but overall, I find that through telehealth, the Zoom has been a very important catalyst to that. Feeling better about what I know about my healthcare, like the names of my prescriptions. I can't commit those to memory, so I look them up online. But there's been some wonderful advancements, and I think that we can continue at that. And again, making it more and I guess this is going to be selfish, more self-centered. How would you like to be treated? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you seems to be screaming in my ear right now. And again, as we age into this community of people, that is the largest community of people, and as at the intersectionality of every other group in the world, it's high time that we started really moving into the 21st and start including people with disabilities in a seamless interaction to improve their healthcare and their mental health and well-being.
Fantastic. Thanks, Albert. Okay, so we have a question here near and dear to my heart. What are some ways hospitals can improve hospital navigation for people with visual disability who do not have someone to help guide them?
I got that.
Go ahead, Albert.
Again, there are some fantastic technologies out there. Now I've got at least 4 or 5 different options. And I know one that has a cane that can provide information if we're allowed to speak about that, JR. But I'll let you do that. But there are wayfinding systems, for lack of a better term. They are GPS systems that are off the grid that you could load jack. I'm using that as a very technical term. Your hospital or your office. Think about it. Once the hospital is built or your office is built, very few things change with regard of rooms or specific areas like the MRI and so on. These technologies today use the footprint and the blueprint and the floor plans to upload information into the computer that you can then enter. Here's where Dr. Gleason's office is. Here's where Dr. Rizzo's office is. And because we have our phones in our hand, our comfortable handheld technology, something we're very comfortable navigating, we are capable into a facility, bypassing as if we could the reception desk. And that helps people who have a severe speech impediment. That helps people who are deaf blind. That helps people who are mobility impaired or compromised in a way that that extra step is going to really tax their health and well-being, and gives all the information into your hand, and is really, in the great scheme of things, inexpensive. What we get in return for having our patients hit the mark and find the location independently, to say nothing about the mental health and well-being I derive from being able to do it by my big boy self. At 60, yes, I said 60, I'm just like I was when I was in kindergarten. I want to do it myself, mommy. I don't really want help unless I absolutely need it.
Excellent. Thanks, Albert. Tanner, quick thoughts?
No, I think that's well, I mean, I think that if what Albert's talking about, like wayfinding, beacon-based stuff, ultra wideband, providing haptic feedback, integrating that into hospital systems, so patients can check in with, like Albert's saying, without touching base with the receptionist, getting to where they need to be confidently, and also like what you were saying earlier, JR, having the agency of knowing where I'm at and person, and the independence of like, hey, I can go to the bathroom on my own, which is a pretty debilitating thing that when you got to tell somebody you need help to go to the restroom, right? So giving someone with a disability the autonomy and agency to stand up on their own and go use the restroom through these indoor navigation systems and wayfinding is tremendous, and I applaud any hospital that's really serious about implementing something like that.
Nathaniel, any quick thoughts?
This is awesome. No, you guys know so much more about this than I do. I'll just say again that the health system needs to be aware that almost, 17% of the people walking through their doors have a visual impairment. So
Yep.
until you recognize that, you're not going to put the resources towards these kind of tools.
You know what else too, Jared? If I could just, again, going back to the added value, a lot of times, and let's face it, hospitals and doctors' office tend to be corporations today, need to see how it's going to impact the bottom line. I've got limited resources in building my business and maintaining it. The types of, again, I'm calling them wayfinding systems. Somebody in the industry is going to beat me for saying that, but it cures a significant number of ills. Not only will it work for people with disabilities, but it for non-native speaking patients who are visiting the hospital for the first time if you're not a native language speaker where the location is. There are so many ways to custom tailor that for the broadest spectrum of populations, maximizing your investments, maximizing the technologies, and building equity into everything you do. And that's critically important, understanding how far-reaching can the technology be. And if you make it accessible and usable, those are three critical components that can never be separated. It is the trilogy. If you make it accessible, functional, and usable, you've improved the usability, functionality, and accessibility and inclusion of nearly 90% of the people from the disability community and have improved the usability, functionality, and accessibility by 10% for the people who are temporarily able. It's a win-win. And once we find and reputation skyrockets.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Albert. I think we're running out of time here, so I want to sincerely thank these incredible panelists for their thoughts today. I also just want to make one plug, really interesting on this question. Digital wayfinding is the #1 new investment being made by health systems in the digital technology.
Amen.
But there's some great data to support the fact that wayfinding technology improves not only patient access and no-show rates, but also patient by over 50 to 60%.
Yep.
We have a lot of research in this topic. I'd be happy to take any questions. And I just want to close again by thanking these awesome panelists and with a quote from Helen Keller. I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but it is my chief duty to accomplish small tasks as if they were great and noble. One step at a time. I thank you all for this opportunity. Looking forward to additional conversation. And I'm going to pass the microphone back to our organizers.
Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Pete, we can't thank the panel enough. This is such a wonderful series of discussions. And what really strikes me is how we need navigators and for all the technologies, for in-person care, for digital health, that we need so much provider education and health system education. And that idea of architecting and redesigning our health systems in a way that makes care so much better, and we're very mindful and inclusive of all of our disability communities is very important. And you raised so many important issues for the low vision and blind communities. So thank you, everyone. It's really tremendous.